Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Welcome back to the live studios here at Radha Lane, right next to Sri Sri Leela Madhav Mandir, ISKCON of Houston, Texas. Welcome everyone back to this ecstatic reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. We have the most dedicated hearers here tonight. There was a big Harinam and all the devotees went to the Harinam, but those who are dedicated to hearing deeply are here tonight. We're reaching the end of or going towards the end of the 9th chapter of the first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. So let's get on with it. Without further ado, we welcome all of you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's hear Srila Sanatana Goswami's beautiful glorification of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Listen very carefully and meditate on the words and the meaning of the words, and you'll learn a lot about the holy name. Oh, yeah. I hope they heard something. Make sure it goes over.
Yeah, kindly turn on the mic.
It's on now?
Yes.
Okay, we just got the mic plugged in. One of our techie persons is on the Harinam. And anyway, I hope you heard something, because we're going to start. All right. Srimad Bhagavata Mahima Stotram by Srila Sanatana Goswami. Please meditate deeply on the meanings of these prayers, because they will enlighten you and bring you deeper into the Srimad Bhagavatam. It goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalidwandoditaditya Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Man Nishtadaka Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Saduta Dayin Atini Chochata Kada Hanamunchagadachin Mam Premna Rit Kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right, reading from Canto 1, Chapter 9, beginning with text 43, the passing away of Bhismadeva. And he just had passed away. He just passed away. Sutta Uvacha. Sutta Goswami said, so Bhismadeva is just in the process of passing away from this world. Sutta Goswami said, thus Bhismadeva merged himself in the Supersoul, Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with his mind, speech, sight, and actions, and thus he became silent, and his breathing stopped. Purport. The stage attained by Bhismadeva while quitting his material body is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, because he merged his self into thinking of the Lord by engaging his mind in remembering the Lord's different activities, his speech in chanting the glories of the Lord, and his sight in seeing the Lord personally present before him. Thus all his activities became concentrated upon the Lord without deviation. This is the highest stage of perfection, and it is possible for everyone to attain this stage by practice of devotional service. The devotional service of the Lord consists of 9 principles of service activities, and they are 1. Hearing, 2. Chanting, 3. Remembering, 4. Serving the lotus feet, 5. Worshipping, 6. Praying, 7. Executing the orders, 8. Fraternizing, and 9. Fully surrendering. Any one of them or all of them are equally competent to award the desired result, but they require to be practiced persistently under the guidance of an expert devotee of the Lord. The first item, hearing, is the most important item of all, and therefore hearing of the Bhagavad Gita and later on Srimad Bhagavatam is essential for the serious candidate who wants to attain the stage of Bhismadeva at the end. The unique situation at Bhismadeva's time of death can be attained even though Lord Krishna may not be personally present. His words of the Bhagavad Gita or those of Srimad Bhagavatam are identical with the Lord. They are sound incarnations of the Lord, and one can fully utilize them to be entitled to attain the stage of Sri Bhismadeva, who was one of the 8 Vasus. Every man or animal must die at a certain stage of life, but one who dies like Bhismadeva attains perfection, and one who dies forced by the laws of nature dies like an animal. That is the difference between a man and an animal. The human form of life is especially meant for dying like Bhismadeva. Text 44. Knowing that Bhismadeva had merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Absolute, all present there became silent like birds at the end of the day. Purport. To enter into or become merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Absolute means to enter the original home of the living being. The living beings are all component parts and parcels of the Absolute Personality of Godhead, and therefore they are eternally related with Him. They are eternally related with Him as servitor and the served. The Lord is served by all His parts and parcels, as the complete machine is served by its parts and parcels. Any part of the machine removed from the whole is no longer important. Similarly, any part and parcel of the Absolute detached from the service of the Lord is useless. The living beings who are in the material world are all disintegrated parts and parcels of the Supreme Whole, and they are no longer as important as the original parts and parcels. There are, however, more integrated living beings who are eternally liberated. The material energy of the Lord, called Durga Shakti, or the superintendent of the prison house, takes charge of the disintegrated parts and parcels, and thus they undergo a conditioned life under the laws of material nature. When the living being becomes conscious of this fact, he tries to go back home, back to Godhead, and thus the spiritual urge of the living being begins. This spiritual urge is called Brahma Jigyasa, or inquiry about Brahman. Principally, this Brahma Jigyasa is successful by knowledge, renunciation, and devotional service to the Lord. Jnana, or knowledge, means knowledge of everything of Brahman, the Supreme. Renunciation means detachment of material affection, and devotional service is the revival by practice of the original position of the living being. The successful living beings who are eligible to enter into the realm of the Absolute are called jnanis, the yogis, and the bhaktas. The jnanis and yogis enter into the impersonal rays of the Supreme, but the bhaktas enter into the spiritual planets known as the Vaikunthas. In these spiritual planets, the Supreme Lord as Narayana predominates, and the healthy, unconditioned living beings live there by rendering loving service to the Lord in the capacity of servant, friend, parents, and fiancé. There the unconditioned living beings enjoy life in full freedom with the Lord, whereas the impersonalist jnanis and yogis enter into the impersonal glowing effulgence of the Vaikuntha planets. The Vaikuntha planets are all self-illuminating like the sun, and the rays of the Vaikuntha planets are called the Brahmajyoti. The Brahmajyoti is spread unlimitedly, and the material world is but a covered portion of an insignificant part of the same Brahmajyoti. This covering is temporary, and therefore it is a sort of illusion. Bhismadeva, as a pure devotee of the Lord, entered the spiritual realm in one of the Vaikuntha planets where the Lord in his eternal form of Paratasarati predominates over the unconditioned living beings who are constantly engaged in the service of the Lord. The love and affection which bind the Lord and devotee are exhibited in the case of Bhismadeva. Bhismadeva never forgot the Lord in his transcendental feature as the Parthasarati, and the Lord was present personally before Bhismadeva while he was passing to the transcendental world. That is the highest perfection of life. Could you bring the stand? It's on my desk. Thank you. Text 45. Thereafter, both men and demigods sounded drums in honor, and the honest royal order commenced demonstrations, Hare Krishna, of honor and respect. And from the sky fell showers of flowers. Hare Krishna. Nice to see you again. I'll read it again, the verse. Thereafter, both men and demigods. Yeah, thank you so much. Whoops. You didn't bring the whole thing. No, there's another part of it. Oh, no, you did. You did. You did the right thing. I should have known. I should have known you would. Thank you. Okay. Text 45, once more. Thereafter, both men and demigods sounded drums in honor, and the honest royal order commenced demonstrations of honor and respect, and from the sky fell showers of flowers. Purport. Bhismadeva was respected both by the human beings and by the demigods. The human beings live on Earth and similar other planets in the Bur and Burvar group of planets, but the demigods live in the Swar or heavenly planets, and all of them knew Bhismadeva as a great warrior and devotee of the Lord. As a Mahajana or authority, he was on the level of Brahma, Narada, and Shiva, although he was a human being. Qualification on a par with the great demigods is possible only on attainment of spiritual perfection. Thus Bhismadeva was known all over the universes, and during his time, interplanetary travel was effected by finer methods than the futile efforts of mechanical spacecraft. When the distant planets were informed of the passing away of Bhismadeva, all the inhabitants of the upper planets, as well as of the earth, dropped showers of flowers to show due respect to the departed great personality. This showering of flowers from heaven is a sign of recognition by great demigods, and it should never be compared to the decoration of a dead body. The body of Bhismadeva lost its material effects due to being surcharged with spiritual realization, and thus the body was spiritualized, as when iron becomes red hot when in contact with fire. The body of a fully self-realized soul is not, therefore, accepted as material. Special ceremonies are observed for such spiritual bodies. The respect and recognition of Bhismadeva are never to be imitated by artificial means, as it has become a fashion to observe the so-called Jayanti ceremony for any and every common man. According to authorized Shastras, such a Jayanti ceremony for an ordinary man, however exalted he may be materially, is an offense to the Lord, because Jayanti is reserved for the day when the Lord appears on the earth. Bhismadeva was unique in his activities, and his passing away to the kingdom of God is also unique. 46. O descendant of Bhrigu, Shonaka, after performing funeral rituals for the dead body of Bhismadeva, Maharaj Yudhishthira was momentarily overtaken with grief. Purport. Bhismadeva was not only a great family head of Maharaj Yudhishthira, but also he was a great philosopher and friend to him, his brothers, and his mother. Since Maharaj Pandu, the father of the 5 Pandavas, headed by Maharaj Yudhishthira, had died, Bhismadeva was the most affectionate grandfather of the Pandavas and caretaker of the widowed daughter-in-law, Kunti Devi. Although Maharaj Dhritarashtra, the elder uncle of Maharaj Yudhishthira, was there to look after them, his affection was more on the side of his 100 sons, headed by Duryodhana. Ultimately, a colossal clique was fabricated to deprive the 5 fatherless brothers of the rightful claim of the kingdom of Hastinapura. We'll let this train have its day, have its moment in the sun. We get used to it after a while. Ultimately, a colossal clique was fabricated to deprive the 5 fatherless brothers of the rightful claim of the kingdom of Hastinapura. There was great intrigue common in imperial palaces, and the 5 brothers were exiled to the wilderness. But Bhismadeva was always a sincerely sympathetic well-wisher, grandfather, friend, and philosopher to Maharaj Yudhishthira, even up to the last moment of his life. He died very happily by seeing Maharaj Yudhishthira to the throne. Otherwise, he would have long ago quitted his material body, instead of suffering agony over the undue sufferings of the Pandavas. He was simply waiting for the opportune moment, because he was sure and certain that the sons of Pandu would come out victorious in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, as his lordship Sri Krishna was their protector. As a devotee of the Lord, he knew that the Lord's devotee cannot be vanquished at any time. Maharaj Yudhishthira was quite aware of all these good wishes of Bhismadeva, and therefore he must have been feeling the great separation. He was sorry for the separation of a great soul, and not for the material body which Bhismadeva relinquished. The funeral ceremony was a necessary duty, although Bhismadeva was a liberated soul. Since Bhismadeva was without issue, the eldest grandson, namely Maharaj Yudhishthira, was the rightful person to perform this ceremony. It was a great boon to Bhismadeva that an equally great son of the family undertook the last rites of a great man. 47. All the great sages then glorified Lord Sri Krishna, who was present there, by confidential Vedic hymns. Then all of them return to their respective hermitages, bearing always Lord Krishna within their hearts. Purport. The devotees of the Lord are always in the heart of the Lord, and the Lord is always in the hearts of the devotees. That is the sweet relation between the Lord and His devotees. Due to unalloyed love and devotion for the Lord, the devotees always see Him within themselves, and the Lord also, although He has nothing to do and nothing to aspire to, is always busy in attending to the welfare of His devotees. For the ordinary living beings, the law of nature is there for all actions and reactions, but He is always anxious to put His devotees on the right path. The devotees, therefore, are under the direct care of the Lord, and the Lord also voluntarily puts Himself under the care of His devotees only. So all the sages, headed by Vyasadeva, were devotees of the Lord, and therefore they chanted the Vedic hymns after the funeral ceremony, just to please the Lord, who was present there personally. All the Vedic hymns are chanted to please Lord Krishna. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 15:15. All the Vedas, Upanishads, Vedanta, and so on are seeking Him only, and all hymns are for glorifying Him only. The sages, therefore, perform the exact act suitable for the purpose, and they happily departed for their respective hermitages. Text 48. Thereafter, Maharaj Yudhishthira at once went to his capital, Hastinapura, accompanied by Lord Sri Krishna, and there he consoled his uncle and aunt Gandhari, who was an ascetic. Purport. Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, the father and the mother of Duryodhana and his brothers, were the elder uncle and aunt of Maharaj Yudhishthira. After the battle of Kurukshetra, the celebrated couple, having lost all their sons and grandsons, were under the care of Maharaj Yudhishthira. They were passing their days in great agony over such a heavy loss of life, and were practically living the life of ascetics. The death news of Bhismadeva, uncle of Dhritarashtra, was another great shock for the king and queen, and therefore they required solace from Maharaj Yudhishthira. Maharaj Yudhishthira was conscious of his duty, and he at once hurried to the spot with Lord Krishna and satisfied the bereaved Dhritarashtra with kind words from both himself and the Lord also. Gandhari was a powerful ascetic, although she was living the life of a faithful wife and a kind mother. It is said that Gandhari also voluntarily blindfolded her eyes because of the blindness of her husband. A wife's duty is to follow the husband cent per cent, and Gandhari was so true to her husband that she followed him even in his perpetual blindness. Therefore, in her actions, she was a great ascetic. Besides that, the shock she suffered because of the wholesale killing of her 100 sons and her grandsons also was certainly too much for a woman. But she suffered all this, just like an ascetic. Gandhari, although a woman, is no less than Bhismadeva in character. They are both remarkable personalities in the Mahabharata. Text 49. After this, the great religious king Maharaj Yudhishthira executed the royal power in the kingdom strictly according to the codes of royal principles approved by his uncle and confirmed by Lord Sri Krishna. Purport. Maharaj Yudhishthira was not a mere tax collector. He was always conscious of his duty as a king, which is no less than that of a father or spiritual master. The king is to see to the welfare of the citizens from all angles of social, political, economic, and spiritual upliftment. The king must know that human life is meant for liberating the encaged soul from the bondage of material conditions, and therefore his duty is to see that the citizens are properly looked after to attain this highest stage of perfection. Maharaj Yudhishthira followed these principles strictly, as will be seen from the next chapter. Not only did he follow the principles, but he also got approval from his old uncle, who was experienced in political affairs. And that was also confirmed by Lord Krishna, the speaker of the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. Maharaj Yudhishthira is the ideal monarch, and monarchy under a trained king like Maharaj Yudhishthira is by far the most superior form of government, superior to modern republics or governments by the people, of the people, by the people. The mass of people, especially in this age of Kali, are all born Shudras, basically low-born, ill-trained, unfortunate, and badly associated. They themselves do not know the highest perfectional aim of life. Therefore, votes cast by them actually have no value, and thus persons elected by such irresponsible votes cannot be responsible representatives like Maharaj Yudhishthira. Thus in the Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, 9th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Passing Away of Bhismadeva in the Presence of Lord Krishna. I mean, when you read the Bhagavatam like this so carefully, you see very clearly how it could actually save the world. You know, if the leading, and Prabhupada kept repeating this again and again in letters and lectures and interviews and room conversations, again and again, he said, if you just take these principles and apply them, if leaders would actually take care of the citizens and not just exploit some, or exploit most for the benefit of some, then the world would become more peaceful. And also all these, now their fires are burning down California, and floods and earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes, and it's going on all over the world. And it's because of the lack of these principles, the lack of proper spiritual leadership. Okay, let's move on. Chapter 10. Departure of Lord Krishna for Dwaraka. Text 1. Hare Krishna. Shonaka Muni asked, after killing his enemies who desired to usurp his rightful inheritance, how did the greatest of all religious men, Maharaj Yudhishthira, assisted by his brothers, rule his subjects? Surely he could not freely enjoy his kingdom with unrestricted consciousness. Purport. Maharaj Yudhishthira was the greatest of all men of religion. Thus, he was not at all inclined to fight with his cousins for the sake of enjoying the kingdom. He fought for the right cause because the kingdom of Hastinapura was his rightful inheritance, and his cousins wanted to usurp it for themselves. He fought therefore for the right cause under the guidance of Lord Sri Krishna, but he could not enjoy the results of his victory because his cousins were all killed in the fight. He therefore ruled over the kingdom as a matter of duty, assisted by his younger brothers. The inquiry was important for Shonaka Rishi, who wanted to know about the behavior of Maharaj Yudhishthira when he was at ease to enjoy the kingdom. Text 2. Sutta Goswami said, Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the maintainer of the world, became pleased after re-establishing Maharaja Yudhishthira in his own kingdom and after restoring the Kuru dynasty, which had been exhausted by the bamboo fire of anger. Purport. This world is compared to a forest fire caused by the cohesion of bamboo bushes. Such a forest fire takes place automatically, for bamboo cohesion occurs without external cause. Similarly, in the material world, the wrath of those who want to lord it over material nature interacts, and the fire of war takes place, exhausting the unwanted population. Such fires or wars take place, and the Lord has nothing to do with them. But because He wants to maintain the creation, He desires the mass of people to follow the right path of self-realization, which enables the living beings to enter into the kingdom of God. The Lord wants the suffering human beings to come back home, back to Him, and cease to suffer the threefold material pangs. The whole plan of creation is made in that way, and one who does not come to his senses suffers in the material world by pangs inflicted by the illusory energy of the Lord. The Lord therefore wants His bona fide representative to rule the world. Lord Sri Krishna descended to establish this sort of regime and to kill the unwanted persons who have nothing to do with His plan. The battle of Kurukshetra was fought according to the plan of the Lord, so that undesirable persons could get out of the world and a peaceful kingdom under His devotee could be established. The Lord was therefore fully satisfied when King Yudhishthira was on the throne and the seedling of the dynasty of Kuru in the person of Maharaj Parikshit was saved.
I never got that point before. It never made sense.
What point?
The battle of Kurukshetra was to remove the...
Yeah? Oh yeah. Text 3. Maharaj Yudhishthira, after being enlightened by what was spoken by Bhismadeva and Lord Sri Krishna, the infallible, engaged himself in matters of perfect knowledge because all his misgivings were eradicated. Thus he ruled over the earth and seas and was followed by his younger brothers. Purport. The modern English law of primogeniture, or the law of inheritance of the firstborn, was also prevalent in those days when Maharaj Yudhishthira ruled the earth and seas. In those days, the king of Hastinapura, now part of New Delhi, was the emperor of the world, including the seas, up to the time of Maharaj Parikshit, the grandson of Maharaj Yudhishthira. Maharaj Yudhishthira's younger brothers were acting as his ministers and commanders of state, and there was full cooperation between the perfectly religious brothers of the king. Maharaj Yudhishthira was the ideal king, or representative of Lord Sri Krishna, to rule over the kingdom of earth, and was comparable to King Indra, the representative ruler of the heavenly planets. The demigods, like Indra, Chandra, Surya, Varuna, and Vayu, are representative kings of different planets of the universe, and similarly, Maharaj Yudhishthira was also one of them, ruling over the kingdom of the earth. Maharaj Yudhishthira was not a typically unenlightened political leader of modern democracy. Maharaj Yudhishthira was instructed by Bhismadeva and the infallible Lord also, and therefore he had full knowledge of everything in perfection. The modern elected executive head of a state is just like a puppet because he has no kingly power. Even if he is enlightened, like Maharaj Yudhishthira, he cannot do anything out of his own good will due to his constitutional position. Therefore, there are so many states over the earth quarreling because of ideological differences or other selfish motives. But a king like Maharaj Yudhishthira has no ideology of his own. He had but to follow the instructions of the infallible Lord and the Lord's representative and the authorized agent Bhismadeva. It is instructed in the Shastras that one should follow the great authority and the infallible Lord without any personal motive and manufactured ideology. Therefore it was possible for Maharaj Yudhishthira to rule the whole world, including the seas, because the principles were infallible and universally applicable to everyone. The conception of one world state can be can only be fulfilled if we can follow the infallible authority. An imperfect human being cannot create an ideology acceptable to everyone. Only the perfect and the infallible can create a program which is applicable at every place and can be followed by all in the world. It is the person who rules and not the impersonal government. If the person is perfect, the government is perfect. If the person is a fool, the government is a fool's paradise. That is the law of nature. There are so many stories of imperfect kings or executive heads. Therefore, the executive head must be a trained person, like Maharaj Yudhishthira. And he must have full autocratic power to rule over the world. The conception of a world state can take shape only under the regime of a perfect king like Maharaj Yudhishthira. The world was happy in those days because there were kings like Maharaj Yudhishthira to rule over the world. Text 4. During the reign of Maharaj Yudhishthira, the clouds showered all the water the people needed, and the earth produced all the necessities of man in profusion. Due to its fatty milk bag and cheerful attitude, the cow used to moisten the grazing ground with milk. Purport. The basic principle of economic development is centered on land and cows. The necessities of human society are food grains, milk, fruits, milk, minerals, clothing, wood, etc. One requires all these items to fulfill the material needs of the body. Certainly one does not require flesh and fish or iron tools and machinery. During the regime of Maharaj Yudhishthira, all over the world there were regulated rainfalls. Rainfalls are not in the control of the human being. The heavenly king Indradeva is the controller of rains, and he is the servant of the Lord. When the Lord is obeyed by the king and the people under the king's administration, there are regulated rains from the horizon, and these rains are the causes of all varieties of production on the land. Not only do regulated rains help ample production of grains and fruits, but when they combine with astronomical influences, there is ample production of valuable stones and pearls. Grains and vegetables can sumptuously feed a man and animals, and a fatty cow delivers enough milk to supply a man sumptuously with vigor and vitality. If there is enough milk, enough grain, enough fruit, enough cotton, enough silk, and enough jewels, then why do people need economic machines, economic development in the shape of tools and machines? Can tools and machines supply vigor and vitality to men and animals? Can machinery produce grain, fruit, and milk, or jewels and silk? Are jewels and silk, along with varieties of foodstuffs prepared with ghee, grain, milk, and fruits, not sufficient for man's pure, luxurious, and healthy life? Then what is the need of an artificial, luxurious life of cinemas, cars, radio, flesh, and hotels? Has this civilization produced anything more than the doggish mentality of quarreling individually and nationally? Has this civilization enhanced the cause of equality and fraternity by sending thousands of men into a hellish factory and the war fields at the whims of a particular man? It is stated here that the cows used to moisten the pasturing land with milk because their milk bags were fatty and the animals were joyful. Do they not require, therefore, proper protection for a joyful life by being fed with a sufficient quantity of grass in the field? Why should men kill cows for their selfish purposes? Why should man not be satisfied with grains, fruits, and milk, which combined together can produce hundreds and thousands of palatable dishes? Why are there slaughterhouses all over the world to kill innocent animals? Maharaj Parikshit, grandson of Maharaj Yudhishthira, while touring his vast kingdom, saw a black man attempting to kill a cow, the king at once arrested the butcher and chastised him sufficiently. Should not a king or executive head protect the lives of the poor animals who are unable to defend themselves? Is this humanity? Are not the animals of a country citizens also? Then why are they allowed to be butchered in organized slaughterhouses? Are these signs of equality, fraternity, and nonviolence? Prabhupada. Vintage Prabhupada. Therefore, in contrast with the modern, advanced, civilized form of government, an autocracy like Maharaj Yudhishthira's is by far superior to a so-called democracy in which animals are killed and a man less than an animal is allowed to cast votes for another less than animal man. We are all creatures of material nature. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the Lord Himself is the seed-giving Father, and material nature is the mother of all living beings in all shapes. Thus, Mother Material Nature has enough foodstuff both for the animals and for men by the grace of the Father Almighty, Sri Krishna. The human being is the elder brother of all other living beings. He is endowed with intelligence, more powerful than animals, for realizing the course of nature and the indications of the Almighty Father. Human civilizations should depend on the production of material nature without artificially attempting economic development to turn the world into a chaos of artificial greed and power, only for the purpose of artificial luxuries and sense gratification. But is the life of dogs, this is but the life of dogs and hogs. Text 5. The rivers, oceans, hills, mountains, forests, creepers, and active drugs in every season paid their tax quota to the king in profusion. Purport. Since Maharaj Yudhishthira was under the protection of the Ajita, the infallible Lord, as above mentioned, the properties of the Lord, namely the rivers, oceans, hills, forests, and so on, were all pleased, and they used to supply their respective quota of taxes to the king. The secret to success is to take refuge under the protection of the Supreme Lord. Without His sanction, nothing can be possible. To make economic development by our own endeavors on the strength of tools and machinery is not all. The sanction of the Supreme Lord must be there. Otherwise, despite all instrumental arrangements, everything will be unsuccessful. The ultimate cause of success is the Daiva, the Supreme. Kings like Maharaj Yudhishthira knew perfectly well that the king is the agent of the Supreme Lord to look after the welfare of the mass of people. Actually, the state belongs to the Supreme Lord. The rivers, oceans, forests, hills, drugs, and so on are not creations of man. They are all creations of the Supreme Lord, and the living being is allowed to make use of the property of the Lord for the service of the Lord. Today's slogan is that everything is for the people, and therefore the government is for the people and by the people. But to produce a new species of humanity at the present moment on the basis of philosophy and religion, justice and peace, God consciousness, and the perfection of human life, in short, the ideology of godly communism, the world has to again follow in the footsteps of kings like Maharaj Yudhishthira or Parikshit. There is enough of everything by the will of the Lord, and we can make proper use of things to live comfortably without enmity between man and man, or man and animal, or man and nature. The control of the Lord is everywhere, and if the Lord is pleased, every part of nature will be pleased. The river will flow profusely to fertilize the land. The oceans will supply sufficient quantities of minerals, pearls, and jewels. The forest will supply sufficient wood, drugs, and vegetables. and the seasonal changes will effectively help produce fruits and flowers in profuse quantity. The artificial way of living, depending on factories and tools, can render so-called happiness only to a limited number at the cost of millions. Since the energy of the mass of people is engaged in factory production, the natural products are being hampered, and for this, the mass is unhappy. Without being educated properly, the mass of people are following in the footsteps of the vested interests by exploiting natural reserves, and therefore there is acute competition between individual and nation and nation. There is no control by the trained agent of the Lord. We must look into the defects of modern civilization by comparison here, and should follow in the footsteps of Maharaj Yudhishthira to cleanse man and wipe out anachronisms. Text 6. Because of the kings having no enemy, the living beings were not at any time disturbed by mental agonies, diseases, or excessive heat or cold. Purport: to be non-violent to human beings and to be a killer or enemy of the poor animals is Satan's philosophy. In this age, there is enmity toward poor animals, and therefore the poor creatures are always anxious. The reaction of the poor animals is being forced on human society, and therefore there is always the strain of cold or hot war between men, individually, collectively, or nationally. Did you know that, anyway, I won't mention names, but there was a politician in Alaska who her sport was to hunt for moose from a helicopter with a high-powered rifle. At the time of Maharaj Yudhishthira, there were no different nations, although there were different subordinate states. The whole world was united, and the supreme head, being a trained king like Yudhishthira, kept all the inhabitants free from anxiety, diseases, and excessive heat and cold. They were not only economically well-to-do, but also physically fit and undisturbed by supernatural power, by enmity from other living beings, and by disturbance of bodily and mental agonies. There's a proverb in Bengali that a bad king spoils the kingdom and a bad housewife spoils the family. This truth is applicable here also, because the king was pious and obedient to the Lord and sages, because he was no one's enemy, and because he was a recognized agent of the Lord, and therefore protected by him. All the citizens under the king's protection were, so to speak, directly protected by the Lord and his authorized agents. Unless one is pious and recognized by the Lord, he cannot make others happy who are under his care. There is full cooperation between man and God and man and nature, and this conscious cooperation between man and God and man and nature is as exemplified by King Yudhishthira, can bring about happiness, peace, and prosperity in the world. The attitude of exploiting one another, the custom of the day, will only bring misery. Who can write like that? Text 7. Sri Hari, Lord Sri Krishna, resided in Hastinapura for a few months to pacify his relatives and please his own sister, Subhadra. Purport: Krishna was to start for Dwaraka, his own kingdom, after the battle of Kurukshetra, and Yudhishthira is being enthroned. But to oblige the request of Maharaj Yudhishthira and to show special mercy to Bhismadeva, Lord Krishna stopped at Hastinapura, the capital of the Pandavas. the Lord decided to stay especially to pacify the aggrieved king, as well as to please Subhadra, sister of the Lord, Sri Krishna. Subhadra was especially to be pacified because she lost her only son, Abhimanyu, who was just married. The boy left his wife Uttara, mother of Maharaj Parikshit. The Lord is always pleased to satisfy his devotees in any capacity. Only his devotees can play the parts of his relatives. The Lord is absolute. 8. Afterwards, when the Lord asked permission to depart and the king gave it, the Lord offered his respects to Maharaj Yudhishthira by bowing down at his feet, and the king embraced him. After this, the Lord, being embraced by others and receiving their obeisances, got into his chariot. Purport. Maharaj Yudhishthira was the elder cousin of Lord Krishna, and therefore, while departing from him, the Lord bowed down at the king's feet. The king embraced him as a younger brother, although the king knew perfectly well that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord takes pleasure when some of his devotees accept him as less important in terms of love. No one is greater than or equal to the Lord, but he takes pleasure in being treated as younger than his devotees. These are all transcendental pastimes of the Lord. The impersonalist cannot enter into the supernatural roles played by the devotees of the Lord. Thereafter Bhima and Arjuna embraced the Lord because they were of the same age, but Nakula and Sahadeva bowed down before the Lord because they were younger than he. Text 9 and 10. At that time, Subhadra, Draupadi, Kunti, Uttara, Gandhari, Dhritarashtra, Yuyutsu, Kripacharya, Nakula, Sahadeva, Bhimasena, Domya, and Satyavati all nearly fainted because it was impossible for them to bear separation from Lord Krishna. Purport. Lord Sri Krishna is so attractive for the living beings, especially for the devotees, that it is impossible for them to tolerate separation. The conditioned soul under the spell of illusory energy forgets the Lord, otherwise he cannot. The feeling of such separation cannot be described, but it can simply be imagined by devotees only. After his separation from Vrindavana, and the innocent rural cowherd boys and girls, ladies and others, they all felt shock throughout their lives, and the separation of Radharani, the most beloved cowherd girl, is beyond expression. Once they met at Kurukshetra during a solar eclipse, and the feeling which was expressed by them is heartrending. There is, of course, a difference in the qualities of the transcendental devotees of the Lord, but none of them who have ever contacted the Lord by direct communion or otherwise can leave him for a moment. That is the attitude of the pure devotee. Text 11 and 12. The intelligent who have understood the Supreme Lord in association with pure devotees and have become freed from bad materialistic association can never avoid hearing the glories of the Lord, even though they have heard them only once. How then could the Pandavas tolerate his separation? For they had been intimately associated with his person, seeing him face to face, touching him, conversing with him, and sleeping, sitting, and dining with him. Purport. The living being's constitutional position is one of serving the superior. He is obliged to serve by force the dictates of illusory material energy in different phases of sense gratification. And in serving the senses, he is never tired. Even though he may be tired, the illusory energy perpetually forces him to do so without being satisfied. There is no end to such sense gratificatory business, and the conditioned soul becomes entangled in such servitude, and the condition without hope of release. I'll read that again. There is no end to such sense gratificatory business, and the conditioned soul becomes entangled in such servitude without hope of release. The release is only effected by association with pure devotees. By such association, one is gradually promoted to his transcendental consciousness. Thus he can know that his eternal position is to render service unto the Lord, and not to the perverted senses, in the capacity of lust, anger, desire to lord it over, etc. Material society, friendship, and love are all different phases of lust. Home, country, family, society, wealth, and all sorts of corollaries are all causes of bondage in the material world, where the threefold miseries of life are concomitant factors. As one associates with pure devotees and hears them submissively, attachment for material enjoyment slackens, and an attraction for hearing about the transcendental activities of the Lord becomes prominent. Once this attraction begins, it goes on progressively increasing without stoppage. Like fire and gunpowder. It is said that Hari, the personality of Godhead, is so transcendently attractive that even those who are self-satisfied by self-realization and are factually liberated from all material bondage also become devotees of the Lord. Under these circumstances, it is easily understood what must have been the position of the Pandavas, who were constant companions of the Lord. They could not even think of separation from Sri Krishna, since the attraction was more intense for them because of continuous personal contact. Their position in separation from him was no less than that of the gopis of Vrindavan. The Lord being absolute, however, separation from him is as good as personal contact. Whoa! Better read this again. I read the last two sentences before.
Yeah, it's little different.
What's that?
Is that all that none of that is enough Prabhu?
No.
That's because it was taken out by the first editors. So read, maybe that was Krishna's arrangement. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, some of what you're reading is not enough thing here.
A lot of them,
Yes,
yeah.
because it was put back in because the editors took it out.
First edition.
First edition. Okay. Under the circumstances, it is easily understood what must have been the position of the Pandavas, who were constant companions of the Lord. They could not even think of separation from Sri Krishna, since the attraction was more intense for them because of continuous personal contact. Their position in separation from him was no less than that of the gopis of Vrindavana. The Lord being absolute, however, separation from him is as good as personal contact. By his remembrance, by his form, quality, name, fame, pastimes, etc., is also attractive for the pure devotee, so much so that he forgets all forms, quality, name, fame, and activities of the mundane world, and due to his mature association with other pure devotees, he is not out of contact with the Lord for a moment. Last part is there?
Last part is that, but in between
There-
the part where it was comparing with the gopis.
Yes,
separation,
he
that
took,
part
anyway, I won't mention names, but I know who took that out, and Jai Dvaita Maharaj put it back in. All glories to Jai Dvaita Maharaj. Hare Krishna. I'm making these jokes because there's controversy in our movement about this.
So originally it was there, but somebody removed it and
Yes.
there with the Maharaj again
Put it back.
I see.
And mainly the changes that were made. Like Prabhupada gave his trusted editors.
Mhm.
And we have in writing that he trusted Jai Dvaita Maharaj and Satsvarup Maharaj practically without question. Anything they did, he trusted that they would do it right, because he gave the instruction that the editors should edit not only for grammatical correctness in English and spelling and all those things, and syntax and all those things, but also for force and clarity. So you can see how forceful and clear that section adds to what it adds to the purport.
Does it say up here in the front what edition this is? The first
No, it would no. That's there. In the Bhagavad Gita, there was clearly a second edition published. The next printing of the Bhagavatam will be the second edition of the Bhagavatam.
Okay, so this is first printing then.
Yes, yes,
Okay, so
yes,
for clarity.
yes. Not necessarily first printing, but the first edition.
Oh,
The very first edition Prabhupada brought over from India, and then there was a first edition, and then there was a second, or a second printing, and some of the corrections were made to that printing. But now, in the next printing, and that's why I'm doing the audiobook for the BBT of the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Bhagavatam, because those audiobooks will match the latest edition that will be printed next, the next printing. One of the reasons that, it happened was because when the book started to be translated all around the world by different languages, the learned scholars who were translating in the different languages, they started asking questions. And then they started, then the BBT started going back, the editors started going back to the Sanskrit and Prabhupada's original texts and finding out. Because what most people don't understand is that Prabhupada was doing, well, if you read his biography, you'll understand, he was doing so much, he did not have time to go back over every word of every book. I mean, he did the Chaitanya Charitamrita in 18 months, and then it was edited and published, all but 2 volumes, in 2 months, which had never been before done in the history of literary production in the world. So he did, and everybody knew when that was going on. They did it so fast. There were bound to be things, because I'm an editor myself. I was trained by Jai Dwaitamar, as a matter of fact, and I know how long it takes. Like Vaisheshika Prabhu's book, The Art of Our Family Business. 2 years it took us to edit that book. One book, 2 years.
And Prabhupada wrote.
And Prabhupada did.
In 18 months.
Yeah.
9 volumes.
Yeah. It was 17 volumes at that time. The beginning, of course, it's the same text, but
Yeah.
just more volumes. Therefore, if anybody creates anxiety or lack of faith or issues, you should know this. You should know this for a fact. You can go to a site on the internet. It's called bbtedit.com. And there you will find all the evidence. You'll find the original text. You'll find the first edition. You'll find the second edition. You'll see what the changes are made and why. Everything is there. bbtedit.com.
Does it matter the case?
Huh?
Does it matter uppercase or lowercase?
Everything lowercase.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, actually. This is one of the reasons why I'm doing this. Because people who are coming daily or viewing, they want to hear direct from Prabhupada. And now the tendency, the trend is, we do so many blogs and vlogs and seminars and courses and all these things. But when you hear the books, systematically all the way through, like this, very slow, very carefully, with other devotees who are sincere, it all comes out. What the world needs, what we have to do ourselves in order to make ourselves proper, to make the world better in the future and future generations. It's all here. Therefore, Prabhupada said his books should be the law books for the next, of our movement for the next 10,000 years.
So in question, Kali Yuga is the time of darkness, or that period of
Yes.
1,000 years. Can we expect anything of perfection during that time?
No, you can't experience overall perfection as you read about in the Bhagavatam while Krishna was present, but we can increased. We can hold back the effect of it, for 10,000 years through the propagation of the Christian consciousness movement, through the proper following ourselves, understanding and following ourselves. And everybody knows, everyone who's actually taken to Christian consciousness seriously, they know how much happiness is in their hearts, how much clearer their vision becomes. Everyone knows. So we just need to increase that. That was Prabhupada's simple formula. Okay, we are at 4:45. So we're doing the natural thing. We're doing reflections. I have to conserve my voice for tomorrow morning because I'm reading the Chaitanya Church for the audiobook. So we'll stop there. We're at text 13. Now let's continue with this reflection. It's very interesting.
So to raise a question, please?
Yes, please.
Regarding the reading.
Yes.
This is after.
This is Thomas speaking, and he's asking a question. This is after.
The war in Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
So Arjuna comes out of it a lot.
Yes. Yes.
But all the rest of them, in other words, as I said, a lot of family members, just like he.
640 million men lost their lives in that war. It was the greatest war in the history of the world.
That is because that family usurped.
Yes.
They did not follow the proper. The
Yes.
Pandavas were the rightful heirs.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Blind king.
That's right. That's right.
Blindly.
That's right. That's right.
Is the blindness?
See, he was elder to Pandava, his brother. He was actually the senior man, and he should have been the king. But because he was blind by birth, according to the Vedic principles, he couldn't be the king.
So he was really physically blind.
Physically blind. But he was also spiritually blind, due to the attachment to his sons. But anyway, then King Pandu took the path of very, very righteous kings, and he went to the forest, and there he left prematurely, and that left, his 5 sons, the Pandavas, children without father. So they were raised by Bhismadeva and given shelter by the Kurus, who were also, they were the same family. Yeah.
But it was the sons of Duryodhana?
The king, the sons of Dhritarashtra.
Wanted.
The sons of Dhritarashtra.
Wanted it. And so
Duryodhana wanted the kingdom, and Dhritarashtra also wanted it. He was too attached to his sons, and he was willing to break the rules of God in order to get that accomplished. And that's why because administratively, the kingdom was pretty well run. There was economically it was fit, but this was the salt or the sand in the sweet rice, I guess you could say.
So Arjuna's conflict when Krishna instructed him was these mothers who lost grandmothers, mothers, and so forth. That was part of what he was raising. Was if I go to war, these are my teachers. These are my.
That's right.
These are my.
That's right.
This is conflict.
That's right.
And Krishna said, that which was not born or was not dead cannot therefore get up and do your duty.
He said that there's a higher purpose. Do what I want you to do, because this is the purpose. That was providence. They were the sons of demigods. They were not ordinary people. They were not ordinary, even ordinary humans.
I didn't have that context before.
Yeah. I mean, there's a really long story. Very long story. The Mahabharata, more than 100,000 verses.
And Bhagavad Gita is chapter 6.
Yeah.
It's also standalone.
Yes.
Bhagavad Gita is part of kind of Mahabharata.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. One chapter of the Mahabharata.
It's a long history, explaining several generations how it comes about, everything.
He gave me that.
And then when Bhismadeva instructed Yudhishthira, which we've just heard about, that instruction was 300 chapters of the Mahabharata. Just the instructions of Bhismadeva were 300 chapters.
So that was a physical war.
Physical war.
History of India.
Yes. Not physical, not history of India,
No?
history of the world.
Okay.
The kings,
That's my
the
confusion.
kings that joined both parties were from all over the world. The warriors were from all over the world.
I never got that. Okay.
We heard a purport earlier, remember,
Yeah.
where it said that the
That's
world,
what I was
the
starting to
world,
confuse.
the world was under one government. There were subordinate states, but there was a Samaraj or an emperor over the earth.
These are in the demigod status then, or they?
No, these are human beings,
Oh.
human society. But Yudhishthira was on that stature, because his father was Yamaraj, the demigod of justice, of Dharma. Huh?
All of the Pandavas.
Yeah, all of the 5 Pandavas were born of demigods through Kunti.
So he
And-
made a
and
mistake in
Madri.
giving them their proper.
Huh?
So Dhritarashtra made a big mistake not
Oh, yeah.
affording them their proper
Oh, yeah.
place.
Huge mistake.
That was part of the reason. There is other reasons also, right, why the war happened.
That was the main reason.
That was the main reason, but...
Well, Krishna wanted to relieve the burden of the earth, because, some of the atheists and rascals or demons that Krishna eliminated before the Battle of Kurukshetra were very big disturbances to the people. So there was that, aspect of Krishna's, and then there was the purpose of showing the world what spontaneous love of God is. But he didn't do it in such a way, or didn't preach it, or didn't do it in such a way like Lord Chaitanya did to spread it. And that's why Lord Chaitanya comes after Krishna. He's Krishna, Lord Chaitanya. He comes after Krishna has left, 4,000 years afterwards, 4,500 years afterwards. And to show how to be a perfect devotee, to get those states of consciousness that Krishna showed when he came with his eternal associates of Vrindavan and Mathura and Dwarka.
Right. You edited this book of Sivaram Swami Maharaj, Krishna Samriti, Volume 1, right?
Mm.
So in there, it describes like when Krishna leaves Vrindavan to go to Mathura, separation, the Brajvasis have for many years.
Mm.
So one of the purport here, Prabhupada was talking about
Same.
that separation, right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
very painful to, even think about that how these devotees would have gone through. So even if you are in that situation, it would be how much painful it would be. Just to some other devotee.
Unless you're a devotee, unless you're a pure devotee, and you can understand that apparent pain was not pain at all, but it was actually the elevation of their love to the highest pitch. The separation that Krishna made with the Brajvasis elevated the pitch of their love to the topmost. Sanatana Goswami, I said this before, I don't think you were here in the room, but I gave the evidence from the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Sanatana Goswami is discussing this topic, and he uses the example of ice. He said, if you make ice cold enough, dry ice, if you put the ice on your skin, it feels hot. And if you take the ice away, it will leave a burn, a red spot burn. So the ice is cold, but it feels hot. So similarly, the apparent suffering that the Brajvasis were experiencing physically, the physical symptoms, were actually symptoms of the topmost ecstasy of love of God in separation. So when we see it, we think like that. How it's unbearable. How can we even think? No, but devotees who are in the know, like that's why Krishna sent Uddhava to Vrindavan to see it for himself, and that's why Krishna left Uddhava on the planet, even where everyone else of his intimate associates went back to the spiritual world with him, but Uddhava had to stay back, and that was the reason, because he had to actually make sure that that concept stayed on the earth. And especially the residents of Bhadrakashram, who were very qualified, but Krishna didn't go to that place. He went so many places in India, but he didn't go to Bhadrakashram, where the most qualified persons spiritually were, Narayan, Narada Muni, Vyasadeva, all these personalities.
What is the reference to an impersonalist?
What is the reference?
What does it mean?
What does it mean?
Who is that, or what is that?
An impersonalist, well, there's two kinds of impersonalists. Actually, there's different ways of looking at it. I'm just reading for the audiobook in the morning, the 7th chapter of the Adi Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita. And in this, Prabhupada published this as a book, a small book. It was called Lord Chaitanya in 5 Features, and it was the 7th chapter of the 1st canto. This book, like this big, large chapter. And there, Prabhupada explains to Prakashananda Saraswati Thakur the difference between Mayavadi, impersonalism, and the real meaning of the Vedanta Sutra. So there's a progressive realization for persons who are approaching the absolute truth, and the first stage of that progression is when one realizes that everything must be coming from a source, the same source, and one develops a kind of equanimity and an equipoised nature, and the perfection of that knowledge, or that philosophical approach to life and to the world vision, is the entrance into the effulgence of Krishna, which makes up the spiritual sky. And we heard in that one purport that we read that the spiritual sky, we're living in the spiritual sky now, but there's a cloud covering it, and that cloud is the material energy. Underneath everything, the background is the spiritual sky.
But we are not capable of seeing it because of the material.
Yeah, it's cloud. It's a cloud. Yeah, just like the sun shines down on the water, creates a cloud, and then covers itself, covers the sun from the vision of those who are on the earth that are under the cloud. So the Brahmavadis are spiritualists who are sincerely taking up the process of jnana, mainly jnana, and differentiating what is matter and what is spirit. It's called neti. The process is called neti, and they're rejecting this. This is not God. This cannot be God. This cannot be God, like that. And they come to the Brahmajyoti like that. But that Brahmajyoti is the effulgence of Krishna. It separates them from the material world, or not separates them exactly, but it elevates them beyond the modes of material nature and the reactions and actions and reactions of material nature. But they end up, after they leave the body, they end up in the Brahmajyoti, which is the effulgent of the Lord and is made up of souls packed together, just like the protons are effulgent particles of light that are coming from the sun. So the souls are also like that. Those who are impersonal, who are in impersonal realization, are like that. and they make up the spiritual sky in the spiritual world. But while they're in the body, if they continue their spiritual progress, and they meet Krishna, they happen to come in contact with Krishna philosophy or Krishna consciousness, then their hearts change. Like the four Kumaras, they were absorbed in impersonalism. They were perfected beings, but when they met Lord Vishnu face to face, then just the smell of the tulsi leaves offered to them and in his body and his vision, their minds hearts became purified, and they fell in love with Krishna. They fell in love with Vishnu, and they became pure devotees. So that's one aspect of impersonalism. A person,
has not seen Krishna yet.
they're going through the process of Vedic elevation, but they haven't seen Krishna yet. They're innocent. They haven't seen Krishna yet. But the other kind of impersonalism, and there are two divisions of it. One is called Shunyavadi, and the other is called Nirvishesha. This is more complicated because the Shunyavadi was brought by Buddha. Shunyavadi means void, that the goal is void, the absolute truth is void. And that's the philosophy. There is no God, there is no individual soul, there is just material energy and the flux and changes of the material forms of material energy, and that's going on eternally, and that's it. There's no spiritual energy, there's no spiritual soul, there's no individuality, eternal individuality of either the soul, and there's no God. That's the essence of Buddhism. There's Dharma, there's what we call sub-religious principles. Non-violence particularly is stressed by Buddha because he came to relieve the earth of the burden of the animal killing that was going on in the name of religion. So, but then there's the other side. After Buddha left, then another person came, and he was an incarnation of Lord Shiva, and he was instructed. This is described in the Shiva Purana and in the Padma Purana. He was instructed by Krishna himself to go to the earth and to preach Mayavad philosophy. Mayavad philosophy. The Buddha, in order to put forward and to convince the people of India, because he was born in India, to convince them of that the Vedas were wrong, because they were, yes, he's the source of the Vedas, but he's saying that they're wrong. This was his.
I did not know that.
This was his strategy, his tactic, to try to stop the animal killing in the name of religion.
Oh, because they sacrificed animals.
Yeah, but there are in the Vedic scriptures, there are prescriptions under very rare cases of an animal being sacrificed, but the animal didn't die and the animal wasn't eaten, the flesh of the animal wasn't eaten, but it was given new life in the presence of all of the persons that were there in the sacrifice.
I did not understand that.
So Krishna told Lord Shiva to come in the form of a Brahmana. This is described in the Padma Purana, and delude the atheist people who had accepted the Buddhist philosophy by reinvigorating the faith, reviving the faith in the Vedas, by propounding a philosophy that says, rather than there is no God or absolute truth, there is God, but he's not personal. He doesn't have a form. Now this is worse than Buddhism, because at least the Buddhists are honest enough to declare openly that there is no God. But Mayavad philosophy says, yes, there is God, but he's not a person. And they take it one step further, and they say that the ultimate absolute truth is impersonal, and anything that is not impersonal is ignorance. So therefore, anything that has form, anything that has activity, is a product of the mode of ignorance, including Krishna, including devotional service. Yeah. And there's no spiritual sky.
Now I understand. Because I read a great version of the Gita a long time ago, but I didn't have full understanding. I also looked into Buddhism. My idea of God was not that God wasn't personal. It's just that it wasn't like the churches who tried to give God some kind of image.
That's why it's very, very difficult, according to Lord Chaitanya, to accept the form of God after one has heard Mayavad philosophy submissively. Once you've heard Mayavad philosophy submissively, even if you may not even realize it, you cannot contain the concept of the personal form of God in your mind. You cannot actually think of the form of God in your mind. Therefore,
That's true. I have seen that personally.
Yeah. Therefore, it's like, it's very bad. It's the worst thing.
Because I didn't attach to any of those belief systems. I was merely studying because of the experience I had.
You were contaminated, and now you're being uncontaminated by hearing Prabhupada's books.
Okay.
But
even though I didn't glue to it or go to a temple or worship.
oh yes, you were contaminated. All of us were. All of us were. Mayavad philosophy is everywhere now. Everywhere. Even the Christians. You just keep scratching deep enough. We had one boy, Jeremy. You remember Jeremy, who was here? You remember Jeremy. He was coming, and he was going to be. He went to visit his brother and sister-in-law in California, who were born-again Christians, and they flipped him right around. Now he's thinking that Krishna is Maya, and the deities are idols, and we don't believe in Jesus, even though we told him we did. But he's just anyway. And they can't accept the form of God. They can't accept that Krishna is God because they just can't accept that anyone can know the form of God. You'll only know when you get there. Yeah.
I made a point
Hannah.
in class this morning,
Hmm.
and I said that Radha Krishna gave the class, and he said people go through stages of realizing the Brahma Jyoti, which is the effulgence, the light, and then they become disappointed, and they come back to the material, and even in this lifetime it can happen, because I personally have.
Yes. Yes.
Then you realize Paramatma, the God situated inside of you.
Yes.
But then you come back to the material energy. And I told him that I realized that was because there's no service. There's no service in
Yes.
those two.
That's the problem. That's the conclusion of the Vedas. This means you've done a lot of devotional service in your previous lifetimes, because it's not that a Paramatma realized soul won't go to service. He can, but the first stage of that Paramatma realization is just to see the form of the Lord. The Mayavadis can't see the form of the Lord. They can't accept it as a form of the Lord. But the yogis who are performing the proper Ashtanga yoga, their goal is, and as Krishna says in the Gita, yukta asita matpadaha. It means after you sit in a secluded place, in a holy place, and sit straight and close your eyes halfway and stare at the tip of the nose, fix your mind, become celibate, all those things, then the goal is to yukta asita matpadaha, to make me the goal of your life. So then Paramatma realized souls are more advanced than the Mayavadis, because they're seeing the form of the Lord in the heart, not just imagining it, but they're seeing it by meditation. That's the goal of yoga, the goal of meditation.
But then we read yesterday that process is a lot slower than
It's slower, yes.
devotional service.
It's slower, and there's an aspect of the soul that doesn't manifest, and that's ananda, bliss, pleasure, spiritual pleasure. It doesn't manifest. The Brahman realized soul realizes a sense of eternity. He realizes that he's eternal, and he gets free from the temporary sufferings of the material world. But the knowledge of who is God and the knowledge of who he is in relationship with God is still not present, is still not manifested. And then in Paramatma realization, then knowledge of that comes. So there's Sat, Chit, Ananda. The soul in the forms of the spiritual world, Krishna's form and all other forms in the spiritual world, are made of Sat, Chit, Ananda. Just like these forms here are made of earth and water and fire and air. So in the spiritual world, the forms are made of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Eternity, knowledge, the sense of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So that's our natural condition. Therefore, we're always looking for happiness. We don't want to die, and we always want to know everything. So only when we meet Krishna face to face do we get that ananda that we're looking for. And therefore, the soul in Paramatma realization has to go forward, and the ones in Brahman realization have to come back, or go back, or go further to the spiritual planets, which is very rare, but it's possible.
You know, you need to conserve your voice. I'm needing some clarity because I've studied so many different things. 23 years ago, the experience that I had was very self-correcting for me. My path was turned around by that introduction of what I thought was because I was told to accomplish for myself.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. We'll see you.
In my mind,
What time is it?
I encountered an idea of God, and I really made it.
In your mind, you encountered an idea of God.
Well, here's the way I say that. I mean, again, it's and I don't mean to be trying to be anything other than that's why I'm needing some clarity. It helped me forgive the people who hurt me. I didn't hold them to account because my answer wasn't, and it said account for yourself. I said, if the things that had not occurred, my life would have consisted of a completely different series of decisions. That allowed me to see why they harmed me, so I no longer had to carry that load. I was free. I could only conclude that someone that would give me that kind of ability to see more clearly, because I knew I wasn't doing the right things. I asked God, help me find the right way, the best that I could for what I knew in my ignorance at the time. So it gave me that clarity. That's the God I am seeking, the one. So I want to think that's what I encountered. It couldn't have been a demon.
That's the super soul in the heart. The super soul in the heart is giving all of us guidance.
Okay, so that's what I encountered.
Yes,
No.
but not. There's degrees of all of these phases of God realization. There's degrees, so you might have gotten a hint, or you might have gotten some, I don't know what it was exactly. I'm not in your heart. I'm not God. But what we can say conclusively is that the Super Soul has brought you to Prabhupada's books, and Prabhupada's books will explain all those things to you very clearly.
Okay.
The nature of your question is not clear. The need is clear. The need for clarification is clear, but your expression of what that need is and how it all came to be requires deeper conversation and more time than we have at the moment. Right now I've got to go and preserve my voice for reading the audiobook in the morning. But we will sit down and talk about that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Because I'm
It's there.
lost and found right now.
No, it's there. You're not, but you're not lost and found. You're found. Hare Krishna. All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming, and thanks for the wonderful reflections. They're becoming deeper and deeper as each day goes by. And we'll see you tomorrow night. And meantime, keep on sharing and keep on caring. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Bhismadev's passing away ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol.